Savvy students will have noticed that in the previous video you could solve that by factoring that. So I wanted to do one more use of the quadratic formula so that you can see that when all else fails, when you can't factor it, and when completing the square, which would actually work but is still just too much work for us to do with all those silly fractions, you can just use the quadratic formula to solve for your roots. So what we want to do again is you always want to start by identifying your A, your B, and your C terms. So here my A is 11, my B is a negative 3, notice there's a negative in front there, and again with the C I also have a negative number, it's a negative 5. So A is 11, B is negative 3, and C is negative 5. So X is equal to the opposite of B, and so if B here is already negative, then the opposite of negative is a positive 3, plus or minus the square root of B squared, or negative 3 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 11, times C, which is negative 5, all over 2 times 11, 2A. All right. So that'll be 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared is 9, minus 44 times 5. Let's see, 44 times 5 is 20. Carry the 2, 220. But a negative times a negative is a positive. So that's plus 220 all over 22. And now let's take a look at 3 plus or minus the square root of 229 all over 22. Now we have to recognize here that 229 I can't really simplify. It looks like it's an irrational number, and I can prove that using our trusty calculator here. If I go 229 and take the square root of that, notice how I get this really gross looking long decimal. It's just slightly more than 15. So what we have to realize is that the square root of 229 is a number. It's just a little bit more than 15. So I still have two roots here. I have the 3 minus the square root of 229 over 22, comma 0. That's one root. So that's root 1. And root number 2 is 3 plus square root of 229 over 22, comma 0. And that's my second root. So that if I were to try and graph this, which would be really crazy to do, my graph would look something like, let's see. It'll be 3 minus 229 divided by 22, so let's see what that looks like. Okay, let's put this in our calculator. That'd be 3 minus 229 square root, close that parentheses, and we'll divide that by 22. So it's this really tiny number here, negative 0.55. So it's a little bit more than a half. So I have a root right around a little bit more than a negative half. And my other root would be, let's try the other root. The other root would be, in parentheses, 3 plus 229 square root, close those parentheses, divide that by 22, and that would be a positive, a little more than, close to 1. So here's our positive 1, and then this would be just a little bit closer there. So our graph would look a little bit something like come down, move up like that, whereas this would be that root there. See, this would be that root there. This other fella would be that root there.